Hi everyone, this is Jen.
Hi, this is Monifa.
So we're so glad to reunite again to explore together about this topic. It's a little bit sensitive, but very, very practical. So we're diving into the world of the friendship on social media and how it relates to the way we connect with the word authenticity. Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
So, Monifa, I have a question again. It's because we are all highly sensitive beings here. And as highly sensitive beings, we love to connect one-on-one, face-to-face interactions, right? But at the same time, it gets very elusive. It gets very kind of confusing in the world of the social media when we try to interpret, say, like certain text-based, text-based comments, text-based, uh, I don't know, kind of a conversational feedback. It gets a little
Mm.
bit tricky here, right? So, what we want to talk about today, anyway, is how are we going to ground ourselves into our authenticity so we don't feel like, oh, we're kind of like, tiptoeing around those eggshells and we can't do us while we can't honoring other people either. Big
Yeah.
topic today.
It's a huge topic because I feel like much like I feel like most highly sensitive people have like their face-to-face interaction and they may
Mm,
feel more comfortable with that, but that's probably again because we built up a capacity through experience, right? We've had to have a certain number of real life interactions. So even if we don't, if we're more introverted, like I, right? If we're more
yeah.
introverted, we still have enough experience having those real life interactions that we have a way of moving forward, right?
Mm,
But if and online, we kind of feel the same pressure. In person, it's why a lot of introverts lose energy in public because they're trying to uh, face something that is agreeable and equanimous to the group.
mm,
So what most of the group would understand and accept essentially is how that shows up. And online we are trying to discern whether they're, what kind of group are we in, and we're usually using that face to face, or even people who don't know they're doing it. A lot of highly sensitive people are reading auras, and so they're
yeah.
having a sense of things that they're
Mm.
used to being able to pick up in real life, so they can decide how to move forward. So, like for people like me, that looks like observing until you get a read and then joining the conversation. Does that feel familiar? Um, and then on real online, you basically have to decide to join the conversation or not, or this is your conversation and you have to respond because this is why you're here, right?
Mm,
Like somebody's
mm,
commenting to you, and now you have to find out the right way to interact because it's your responsibility in the held space. So, so it drives this kind of question, like, do I be as deep as I am, right? Or do I start light and then go for the kill, right? Like, um, even when I'm interacting like on social media, like social media to be social. So there's this new thing showing up through Instagram called Threads. Has that rolled
mm.
out on your site yet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
heard of it.
So
Yes.
so going on there, it's like the reason why social media got started. It's like people are having literal conversations, they're asking questions, they're
Yeah.
joining conversations they're interested in, but it is a conversation. And like what you see is the primary conversations are like, what dress should I wear? And like, why, I don't know, like TV shows and like just stuff that most highly sensitive people and especially introverts are just not in participation with or don't care about, right? And
Right.
so you have to fit in or jump in somewhere at some point, and it was usually
Mm,
like an insight. It's usually, well, I see it this way, which is differently, right? It's usually, so how much of that is disruptive, which is what we are. We tend to be disruptive. How much disruptive do we get to be? And then how much do we just kind of go in the shallow end until we have a relationship built, and then and then drop the bomb, right? um
I love this because
it's so interesting, this
yeah, I love this so
conversation.
much because you were talking about how to swimming, in between those fine lines, right? And those fine lines are not like guidelines. Hey, people, you have to follow this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like it's so energetic in a way that if we don't feel like we can be comfortable enough to be ourselves, then for sure we're gonna just share, say, a certain percentage of ourselves and reserve the rest of it. And like I'm not sure if I can actually show up fully as who I am because I might be judged, right? And that's the tricky part because, um, you know, the polarity side of it is like, but I crave for emotional intimacy, right? Because we all crave that. But how do we navigate? How do we allow ourselves to feel safe? So I love what you just said about like, okay, because we are somehow very tapped in terms of reading energies in our own ways, right? And then feeling into the space, like, oh, it's like a dance. Okay, if the person is sharing a little bit more, okay, let me just participate a little bit more too, right? So it's like a dance rather than let me just overshare, and then the other person's like, I have no idea.
I'm talking about death today, but
yes.
So I mean, it's so true though. Like the people that I connect with are having these conversations on a daily basis, and they're not scary to them. Like, I have friends that are grief counselors, and people are talking about living through sickness experiences that may cause death, right?
Right.
So they're used to having intense conversations, and they're to them the real conversations. So like, what are the ways I've navigated is by like sharing humor when I can, which is very rare for me. Like, but when it shows up, I do my best, like to go ahead and just put something forward, even if it's going to be super weird. But for the most part, in my space, I'm as deep as I am. Right? Like, so on my thread, on my space, you're getting like intense truths. Right? That's what's living there, right?
When you
Because
say it's your space, it's your community in your group,
well, and that's what it'd be
or
lovely. I feel like we feel safer when we have those barriers, right? Like if it's my group, my name's on it, then this is what I get where I get to be whoever I want to be, right? Because you've created that container.
exactly.
And so that's a really good place to start for people who are not ready to share all of themselves immediately, which is totally fine. It's your right and to reserve that. And, it's how I started online. As I started my own group, I knew exactly who was in there, and I knew who I was talking to in order
Yeah.
for me to feel safe being myself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that circle just gets to expand as we grow and evolve and do our healing and do our work. And so now I feel safe being myself in a public space. Not anybody can read my thread. It's not a
Right.
group, so anybody could read my thread. But the container I've set is that it's my thread. So like, you're gonna get me on this thread. Now,
Yes.
it may be too intense for the average bypasser, and many people will think of it as always talking about business, because it is my business. But my business is my purpose, is my life. So that's the way it goes, right? Like, and I don't have to apologize for that either in my space, right? So even though it's not like sequestered from the elements, I am reserving the right within my thread to show up authentically, right? And then if I'm interacting on somebody else's thread, I may pull it back a little, right? Like I might
Yeah.
say, this is obviously misogyny. Like I would, I'm not gonna share my full like opinion, right, on somebody else's space, but I find a place to interact, and I try to gentle it, or I give it the balance so that it's not that I'm in opposition, that I'm I'm in agreement and have other ideas, right? So I'm still sharing the unique qualities of what I'm sharing, but I'm not like obliterating whatever they're trying to do within their framework because I have a completely different opinion, right? So
This is really beautiful because I fully resonate when you're saying like when we're in our space, you doing your business and I'm doing my business at the same time, we want to fully show up with our element. And that way people would understand more about, okay, so being who you are is actually a beautiful permission to ourselves, right? So that is understandable. But now let's say we're all empath and then, gearing towards joining other community that, the title seems, yeah, we should be a fit in the community, but at the same time, you're sort of like, I'm not too sure, the group dynamic I'm going to be able to fit in. So that part of the story, for example, would be triggered due to, the our collective healing of, we're a people pleaser, and we have to protect our, little emotion inside, we have to make sure that, okay, just so that anyway, there's that little part of us that just still have that pressure to conform in order to fit in to a certain group, right? Because me and you, because we're doing our we're loyal to our purpose, we do our space, on a regular basis. But for people who are, let's just say, in general, they're just highly sensitive, empath, and then regular folks, they just want to feel that sense of belonging, to pray for that intimacy, to deal with other people, but yet feeling like, withdrawing because I'm not too sure. What do they do then, in this case?
yeah, I think that's a really hard question because it's so specific to the person. Like where are you ready to jump in is always kind of my question. What is your gut response? Do you know it? Like what is your gut resonance of where you would jump in, what you do want to say even before prompted or before you're responding to the group? Like, do you know that? Like if you know that, then it's just again kind of how much of that are you sharing
Mm,
at what level of interaction. So
mm.
so for a lot of people, they're only sharing the the tips they've gotten from other people, like or other things that they feel like is an offering, but not in and of themselves, right?
Mm.
And but this is our problem as highly sensitives with society to begin with, right? Is that we're like, well, if you're gonna talk, like I want to hear you. I don't want to hear your quote, so to speak, but or at least tell me what you think about the quote, right? I think that's a habit. I feel like that's a really actually one of the best ways to joining a conversation before you're really ready to share your own voice is to use a quote because at least you can show what you're resonating with,
Mm. Mm.
right? I think that's as valuable, if not more, when you have like names that have kind of recognition that are really archetypes that you are using as mentors and inspiration, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's a great way to move forward. But even with that, like, I don't know about you, but on my most highly sensitive introverted day, I'm like, you screw your quote. Like, what do you really think? Right. Or, but, well, that's nice. But like, I haven't heard words from you in like
Mm.
6 months because all you do is share quotes.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
would love to know what you're thinking. Right. And so, but that is an intimacy share. So we're, anyways, we're criticizing because people are superficial.
Yes.
I don't know. For me and the people that I've like kind of been around as highly sensitive people, as introverts, we tend to be. That's our point of critique. The conversations are superficial. Like if they're not being real, then I don't need to be real. And so, and then we get bored because we're not having conversations that we're interested in.
And then we're out.
And then we leave. And then we're like, well,
Yeah.
there's no place for me. There's no place for me to be. Right. And then Like, instead of saying, well, these are really superficial conversations, let me throw my idea out there. Let me see if anybody is interested in this conversation,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And I think that's what you really want to start doing in groups, because the truth is you're not gonna stand out with that surface stuff, right? They're gonna be like, oh yeah, well, I've heard that quote before, right? So you're not the originator, so they're not gonna think of you
mm.
when they are reminded of the quote. They'll just be like, oh yeah, I like that quote, right? But again, like if it was on your platform, then it'd be like, well, this is something I resonate with, and you see the rest of my messaging and you see why it's pertinent to me, right? Whereas if you're just throwing it out in the group, we're just like, Friday, like, it doesn't mean that much, right? Um, so yeah, so I think it's important to kind of know your point of entry. Um,
Mm.
do you know what conversations you want to have? That's a question I ask on the regular. What conversation do you want to have? And
I
then it's
can't,
so interesting how
yeah.
we turn that on the group. Like, well, the group will tell me what conversation I'm
Mm.
having. No,
I,
don't wait for the external, right?
yeah. I just have to say like how much I resonate with what you just shared because I used to attend several, I would say, either spiritual communities or, highly sensitive empath communities. And sometimes I found myself in exact situation as what you just described. Okay, people, well, okay, our intention originally was to really connect in a deeper way because we all don't want to swimming on the surface, right? But at the same time, it's like no one is actually going deeper, right? And then exactly what happened was like, oh, wasting my time. No, forget it. It's not suitable for me, right? I don't want to waste my energy here. And then I withdraw. And then there's no beneficiaries in these interactions, right?
And to give
So
us like our allowances, like the person who set up the group is setting the archetype of the group, right? So it may not be necessarily your fault that there's like an atmosphere of superficiality, right?
right.
But it's just something to recognize that if that's the complaint, how are we meeting it, right?
But one thing that you just pointed out, I so appreciate is you didn't use the word self leadership, okay? Because I think we are all leaders, doesn't matter who the baby probably is not yet, but I'm just saying like we all have that leadership quality within us. So knowing that even though we're in a group dynamic, but if we are sincere enough or genuine enough or the intention is to show up authentically as ourselves, then we do have also the I would say the right to turn on that switch, right? How can I be more and feel okay, allow myself to feel more empowering in this dynamic, this group dynamic? If I don't feel fully comfortable, but what actually makes me feel more inspirational and empowered at this point to bring something different, like a spark. And if I try and it still didn't work, fine, at least I tried. I did my best, right? So
Yeah.
rather than say, well, I assume it's not going to work. I assume this is not going to be a suitable one for me, then I'm just going to check out, right? So instead, I'm also like allowing myself to kind of inviting myself to lean in more of the discomfort of saying something that probably might stir up something in other people in the group, right? But
Yeah.
if I remain silent and not allowing myself to express, people will never know what my needs are in the group either. So, right, this is a
Well,
delicate.
they can't
Yes.
respond to your authentic self if your authentic self never shows up,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes. Uh-huh.
And so what's scary about that is the vulnerability of showing up as your full self without knowing who you're introducing yourself to, right? Is you don't know
Hmm.
how people react to the deepest parts of you when those are really the only parts that are the ones that are authentic, and that's just the truth. Like, you are deep, right? That's not going to change all of a sudden if you are a deep person. And so it's the question, like, am I willing to do that? And then what are my entry points? So like there's a reason why you're drawn to the group. If the title resonated with you, then there are factors within that title that are conversations that resonate, right? So if it's part of the title and then it's up for free grabs, whether somebody has already started the conversation or not, right? So if you're waiting for somebody else to start the conversation, then that's when you're not living up to the possibilities of your leadership, right?
Yeah. Wow. This can trigger a lot of, our own inner healing, even though we're talking about the group dynamics, right? We were talking about what the hell, we can't really connect with each other online, even though it was just only a freaking message, just a click of a
One
thumb.
message, but it's a big deal, like, right? The same way we want a reason, right? At least as an introvert, I'm not going to walk up to a stranger on the street and say, hey, like, have you had any energy work lately? What do you think about astrology? Like, I'm not going to do it. It's not going to come up on a daily conversation with random strangers. And so, I think it's really hard because for me, there's no reason to have the conversation, right? Unless we're going to talk about something interesting, like those things.
Yeah.
Right. And on a daily basis, I'm not randomly talking to strangers. And on social media, everybody's a stranger.
Yes.
So again, like, if you haven't had a plan for starting a conversation with a stranger, then that's probably your biggest hesitation. When I think of it, and I think again with these same people, it's the same conversation that I'm having more and more often, which is why I built a branding system, because it's the same thing. Like, I don't know how to introduce myself. Like, if I like choosing top line conversation, like, what is the entry point and for somebody to get to know you, right? And so, yeah, hi, whatever, we can deal with the hellos, but then what's next, right? What's next? Well, actually, I'm only on Facebook because I have a business and I love to get to know people, but honestly, like, I have a business, right? And I think that conversation would be a lot easier if we weren't throwing our business in front of our identity.
Wow.
Right? Like, which is what happens a lot, and what obliterates the authenticity, because you would never, there's nobody I know online that would walk up to somebody, which I have done, in public and say, have you heard about my business? Right? Like, that takes like big confidence energy to do that. I have done that, and it's random, and you have to be very well in a place of power impact when you say something like that, because either somebody's just going to walk away, or there's no actual connection,
right?
Because they're like, why do I care about your business? I don't care. Right? And that's what people are doing online. They're like, I'm starting this conversation, and they're like, but I don't care about your business. I don't even know you. Right? And so, like, if you start with your identity, say, well, I'm, this person, and, and I also happen to have a business, I'd love to get to know you. That's a different conversation, and it's way more authentic, right? And then honestly get to know somebody before you talk about your business. You wouldn't expect it any differently in real life.
I'm chewing every word that you share. It's so good. So basically, acknowledging each other as human first, right? Exactly. Period. Before you want to dive into even deeper, whatever that you think is important to you might not be important to the other person, right?
And as
And
a highly sensitive person, like there's something vital there. If you really want to start a conversation with somebody, there's a reason, right? Like, and so you just tell them why. Well, I know this is weird, but
mm,
what I noticed about you is, and it's not, and that's a great place to start because it's not all about you, right?
mm,
Um, what I noticed about you is, and that's why I decided to reach out. I'm this person and I have this business, which is why I'm online, but I'd love to get to know more about you or, see and connect. Yeah.
yeah. So, this kind of prompted me to want to talk about a little bit of the darker side of the social media connection dynamic, which is like, oh yeah, okay, we both are on the platform doing our own business, right? At the same time, say, oh, this person probably know the other person has a bigger audience or whatever, right? Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
there's that ulterior motives of getting to know that person to become a potential network type of deal in order to get something out of it. And that is what I have noticed, that
Yeah.
there's that agenda behind a person's energy, and that creates a lot of distrust among people, I think, you know.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest, again, as an introvert, I would never start a conversation with a stranger in a
Yes.
messenger chat. I would comment on something that they're doing, or I would, you know, join their page and notice what's coming next. Like, and then I
Mm,
would want to meet them. I would want
mm,
to like go to their event or
mm.
see where they're talking, right? So I can have that conversation with them, right? And get to know them before I like I don't know, but energetically there's that connection. There's also a connection, right? There's a cord that starts once you
Yeah.
start to develop a relationship with somebody. I'm not doing that with any random person on the internet. Now I know we build these muscles for our businesses, but it's weird. I don't know. That's how I feel as an introvert. Um, and that falsity that well, I want to get to know you because of your numbers, like
Mm,
that, it shows up in the language, right? So first we got to start trusting ourselves. If we're recognizing something that, like, words are vibration, so the words there and the words missing are telling you something, right? And so now, like, what we have to examine is this our previous experience trauma of thinking we're finding a friend when they just wanted more numbers, right? Or is this a perceived trauma that
mm,
I know this game, I'm not playing this game, right?
mm.
Um, and then where's the opportunity? So in other words, even though they don't have the awareness, I feel like this is important for, again, highly sensitive people to pick up, because we do have more awareness than other people. So maybe they don't have the awareness that they're coming off business first,
Yeah.
right? And it looks inauthentic. And so, but there's a possibility because you truly do align. Like you have a similar message or a similar people that you serve, and there's synergy there that wants to be explored, but we're more in awareness over the differences in sizes than we are of the possible connection, right? And to me, that again, that talks about our run up against inauthenticity,
Mm.
because now we're coming as our business. Our business has numbers, right? Our online persona has numbers. Like if we're identifying with that when we're in this conversation more than we're identifying with our humanity and what that may look like outside of the numbers and the business persona and all the things, then it's really easy to skew the conversation, right?
So true. Because our ego gets trippy, right? Like, oh yeah, what I'm talking about, I'm spending time with energy with certain people here. I better come across as a professional, da 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 da, in order to bring my business message out, right? But I have to be really honest. I used to really getting trapped in those kind of energy back in the days. And I found myself being inauthentic at a certain period of time. And I have to reevaluate, like, wait, hold on, what am I attaching to? So I have to ask myself really blunt, straight questions. Like, okay, Jen, without say metamorphosis, whatever that I call myself, without this, without that, with all the labeling, delabeling it, who are you? You're just a person who's breathing the air, having your own experience, period, just like anybody else on the street. Same, right?
Yeah.
And so that really gave me like a quick, awakening in a way that I need to just stay true and always come back to, I'm just sharing who I am right here, right now, in this present moment. And there's no mental agenda of, oh, I'm trying to latch on to a certain parts of the identity or persona that I'm trying to create unconsciously to gain that perceived imagery or whatever from outside, right?
Right. To have that perception and be perceived in their full value, which is usually our aim, is to well represent ourselves, right? And so sometimes that gets lost in that control, that whatever we think is going to give that impression, right, instead of what is, and that you are those things. You are valuable. You do have the experience of bringing a certain amount of communities together, and you are a person that is a light for people. Like those are what you are. It doesn't and I like to say that we don't need to explain who we are. Like, I find that empaths feel like they have to teach people who they are. And I feel, and I do believe that's true when it comes to not having a clear field, and you're setting a certain level of boundary so you can notice when people are encroaching upon what's true for you. But in essence, you are who you are. You don't have to explain and really what it is that you're trying to make that valid. You're trying to make them believe it. You don't have to sell who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're a person that provides healing, like especially as an intuitive and highly sensitive person, like I can tell that when I see your smile. I can tell that when I see your face. There is a light within you, right? And so that's not something you have to prove to me, right? And even in our ignorance, there's an awareness, right? So the people who don't have the word healer as a defined part of the vocabulary are still sensing, wow, this person has so much light. This is why they want to know what's next for you. It's why they join in the conversations, because they can see that whether they know what they're saying or not, right?
I have to say, I love this so much. Yeah, I love this so much because I feel like, this conversation, even though it's just two of us, but then I think collectively we're shifting in a way according to, the depth of healing that we have to do for ourselves. So the shifting part, what I'm saying is, oh yeah, we have to be professional. And what is my elevator pitch, by the way? So in order to say that within 1 minute, or less than 30 seconds, and people grasp the best imagery of who you are, right? I used to, really got into those traps, the marketing stuff, that I have to do certain things in order to kind of, receive my own or build my credibility on certain things, right? Oh, yeah. But that's not okay to my soul currently. It's like, no, again, go within. Do you feel a sense of lack of self-worth there? If I really have to point it out, there's that lack of sense of self-worth where you don't think that you are already enough unless you attach to certain thing, or there's a need to explain for people to understand what you do, who you are, verbally, whatever, right? So such a beautiful point you just share is you genuinely connect with others by the presence, by the presence.
Well, with your presence. And what I love for people who aren't used to starting conversations to have when they have businesses
Right.
is for them to again know their most pertinent conversations. We think there's kind of only like there's only a certain person that will get it, or there's only a certain
Mm.
experience that is ready for this.
Mm.
And it's may be true in its focus. In other words, the centerpiece of what you do and the truth, like people who would understand the depths of the understanding that you're coming from and the wisdoms that you've collected, that may be an extremely unique person. But the person who can get a sense of who you are is all of humanity.
Yes.
Even
Oh.
unsensitive people, if you want to call them that, or normies. I feel like that's been a word that's thrown around. But normal people are still picking up vibrations.
Yes, totally. I
They
agree.
may not, they don't have to understand. And most of them are used to walking around in their ignorance. They are used to perceiving at a level in which they don't always understand, right? So they are used to living the way they are living and will get enough from you to be
Mm.
able to have a sense of what you
Mm.
do. They might
Mm.
not know, and that might
Mm.
bother them cognitively. It
Mm.
might bother you because you're an
Mm.
empath and you're picking up on the fact that it bothers them. But it is, but it's but they will feel it, right?
Yeah.
And so even I say all the time, even when our words aren't perfect, people will understand how they feel you.
Mm. Mm.
In the beginning, my words were so discombobulated. And I'm sure you can even look back to our first videos and how
Ah,
slowly I spoke, right? To like this video, and I'm kind of trying to get the thoughts out as fast as Spirit's providing them, right? And the difference is night and day in my processing speed, right? But it's still like that fact of how are we able to process what we want to say to the world.
mm.
It starts by the inner discovery, right? The inner question. So what I always love to point people to is like, where are the places that you're asking those questions? And if you don't know how to ask those questions, who are you uh, allowing to help you figure that out, right? Who is supporting you by understanding yourself at a deeper level so that you
Mm.
can answer these questions, right? Like, what are your dominant conversations?
Mm.
Like there's things that you want to talk about every day and you're just looking for the right people to sit down and shut up until you finish speaking, right? Like I mean, enough,
That's so
that's the
funny.
extreme version of that. But basically we're waiting for people to that get it enough that they're ready to hear more,
Yeah. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And and a lot of our visionaries are this way because they have so much to say and it is so vital and it is deep and it's world changing,
Mm.
literally,
Mm. Mm.
right? And so we're just waiting for enough people to gather so we can have that conversation, and yet we already have our platforms. Oh my gosh, so this came through me today and I feel like this wants to be spoken, so I'll say it real quick. um, we are out there on social media building our platforms, right? In order to build a platform, this is how it came to me. In order to build a platform, you must first take up space,
That's
right?
the truth. Yes. Yeah.
And so
Mm.
you have to make space.
Mm.
That's that's our sovereign responsibility. We have to make the space for the
Mm.
creation or the happening or the experience that we want to have and or give. So we must create the space, right? And we're waiting for permission to take up space. This is what's happening when we're talking about those group conversations. Like, well, this is the group. I don't know. Like, I don't want to be too weird, just which is just another word for disruptive. Like you are. If you know that's who you are, then just be like, well, how much of a destruction am I causing today? Like, are we doing pebble-sized disruptions and waves in the field? Or are we doing like, here's the boulder and a jam, right? Like, it depends. And sometimes, like, I feel like there's cycles to those things too. Like, sometimes you just want to start with the pebbles, and then one day,
Sure,
like,
sure.
I've got stuff to say, and like the full boulder drops, and you're just like, whoever can stand it, come with me. Yeah, so I feel like I don't know what I was talking
No,
about.
it's a great analogy. It's literally a great analogy to like, let's just, let's take our little hands, our little inner child's hands and do it with experimental curiosity, right? Like, okay, today I'm gonna say this, and to know that I'm safe enough to share who I am. It's part of who I am, right? It's not full of who I am, but the part of who I am is actually being acknowledged by myself by showing up. So tick, okay, I'm safe. So the next time, maybe I'm gonna play a little bit bigger energy here and then see if I'm safer, right? And so test out from the pebbles to the boulder. I mean, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, test them out and see. Because I think we think our boulders are bigger than they are. Like, I I threw out a boulder a couple days ago, and I was like, this is going to be interesting. So I was like, either it's going to like kind of provide, you know, well, cause it's going to either cause trigger responses or what it did cause, which is like silence. People just were like, what do I do with that? I don't know what you're saying. So, which is okay. Like, I feel like if I had never thrown the boulder, then I would always assume that my boulder throwing is going to cause a trigger response, right? Because I haven't really done it before. This is really my first entree into boulder throwing, right? So I think it's important for us to see if we are believing something we have yet to prove, you know?
Okay, I think we've talked so much, and then let me just grab this all kind of in the anchor. Coming back to the friendship, topic that we're talking about. So what you just said was so important is doing this backwards. So the boulder part, right? So allowing ourselves to take up space without apology means that, when we are hoping that we get to really build a true connection, we can't be afraid of our own expression in a way, right? So we're allowing ourselves to build that connection with other people. At least they have to feel our genuine motive, right? By taking up space. And the second one, earlier you talked about the self-worth part that we just, we talked about is like, don't identify yourself with things that's outside of yourself. So when you're lingering in those mental fantasies, then honestly, we are not in our presence. Then how do we connect with people without being here? Right? And people feel that. It doesn't matter if it's sensitive or non-sensitive, whatever. I mean, people, they feel, as you said, right?
Yeah, and anytime you're trying to hide parts of yourself, people feel it. One of the things, I used to be quiet. I mean, I still am quiet, but before it was I was hiding. I didn't trust people. I didn't trust them to respond to me well. And so I would hide until I felt like, again, there was an entree point or what I understood was to be accepted in the group. And some people, and a lot of people would be triggered by it because it was the quiet, judgmental person in the corner. So they thought of it as judgment because I was in my shadow response of hiding, right? Wow. Now, like when I'm quiet in a group, they just think I'm deep, right? They don't think, oh, she must be thinking awful things about me, right? Like, which is typical, right? And that's another thing that's happening. We have these kind of earlier experiences, which we hold as proof, but our past doesn't have to determine our future, right? So it's important to reestablish how we want things to be.
So again, like including this point that you just shared, I feel like, highly sensitive empath or, just highly sensitive beings in general, when we're building, allowing ourselves to build connection with other people more authentically, it's important to just checking with our energies, right? Checking with our energies. So we have a kind of like a barometer within ourselves, like, okay, well, I'm hiding, and I acknowledging myself that I'm hiding because of my own fear. So now I'm allowing myself to get out of the hermit mode more, and I'm going to ensure my own safety. So it becomes like it's our self-leadership in a way. It's taking self-responsibility to checking with ourselves where we are at this moment. So we don't have to feel like we have to kind of like do zigzagging while connecting with other people, because we know so well of this is the energy I am in today, not tomorrow, but today. So I'm going to honor this. And then so I can show up however way this connection gonna carry out. If it doesn't feel right, then I'm going to choose forgiveness.
Yeah. Well, it's that kind of question of to me, it comes back to like taking up space, right? Like it comes back to that because the question is like, is there enough of you there to respond to? Uh, when we are talking about the group dynamics, it becomes even more obvious. But when you are talking about the friendship space, so like if you're talking about literally just making a friend, and that can be in person or online,
Yeah.
like exactly what you're saying, right? Are we giving ourselves permission to take up space? And this is a good checkpoint to say, are you doing it? Is in your friendships currently, are you seeing? Or do you have the story that the other person mostly talks, that I'm mostly there for others, I'm not worried about myself? Like, are those commonalities or have been in your life? You will know, if that's showing up in the group dynamic as well, because that just means that you're not taking up space in your friendship.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And what I love about what you said is that it helps us to know. Do you know? Do you know when you're present? Do you know when you're aligned? Do you know how to recognize when you're present and aligned? Or are you thinking you are, and then sometimes you realize you've done one of your things, right? And then you realize, well, I couldn't have been. If I was fully present, I wouldn't have done the thing, right? And so that's why, again, I think it's important to find support for these things, because we don't always know how to tell. And if you don't know how to tell where you are, you can't determine where you're going. And it causes even more fear, anxiety, overwhelm when we try to get someplace we don't even know where we're at the starting point yet.
And that brings more miscommunication and misunderstanding when we're showing up. We seem like we're showing up, but we're not really showing up energetically. Like physically speaking, yes, but then energetically, no, right? So there's a cutoff that you just feel kind of like discombobulated, as you said, right?
Totally discombobulated and therefore unseen, right? Because you weren't even there to notice if you were seen. That's not true. But that is the difficulty. And when we are trying to speak from that uncentered place, then it's causing all of those discrepancies that you're talking about. And it's true for any action. Sorry to say, for my task oriented people, if you're doing tasks in order to be productive before getting centered, then you're causing the same ripple effects in your process, your projects, and your opportunities. And so I do think it's really vital to have a sense of what I call come from, where you're present and open to the higher possibilities for yourself.
This is so good. We can expand like forever. And
yeah, I know.
Let's just say, okay.
I
know. Wait. So let's wrap this up. There are so many points. So let's just say 3 points for highly sensitive beings or empath. how can they help themselves to do self-care in terms of managing their connection on social media while not feeling overly cautious or overly overwhelmed, that type of thing. So number one, again, take up space without apology, because everything that you're feeling triggering inside is an opportunity or a medicine for you to heal yourself, and that's just part of our journey, right? And then number two is don't get identified with things that is outside of yourself externally, because that's the easiest way to lose our presence, right? And what's number three you said earlier is so good.
I would say number three is know your conversations. Like know what you want to talk about before you go to the party. Like know what you want to talk about. Know what's interesting to you. Because that's where we start to lose ourselves, because when we do see the entry point, then we're like, oh wait, and somebody else already knows, right? Like just know what's important to you, know what your conversations are, and know where your entry point is, like about what you feel comfortable with sharing with strangers.
And let the ripple effect take you, either as a pebble size or stone size or the boulder size, right? Following the process. And literally, I think we're in this strange era where we have to learn or relearn or unlearn so many things in order to feel like, oh, this feels authentic to me. Well, that didn't feel authentic to me. But so honoring our energy in that moment, I feel it's really, really important too for all highly sensitive empath, right?
Get present and then go. That's what I like to say.
Get present and then go. Get present and go. Amazing. Thank you, Monifa. So guys, I hope you receive values from this topic of navigating friendship on social media. I'm learning, Monifa's learning too, but we definitely feel it's important for us to really connect within ourselves so you know where you can enter with grace and ease.
Meet
Anything else
you want to?
Meet yourself there. Yes. All right, so we're looking forward to the next episode of whatever that we feel called to create. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.